Okay. Well, I wanted to talk about rocks. So I'd mentioned them before, but rocks are from the Entrepreneurial Operating System for Business Management, which is a very well-known organization that helps businesses sort of grow and manage their business. So as we know, a successful endeavor should have clearly defined goals, and the progress towards those goals is generally broken up in timelines. So you'll have a 10-year goal, a 3-year goal, and a 1-year goal. And then your quarterly objectives are your rocks. So your objectives are what you are stepping stones to complete your overarching goal. And so one of the things that I really like about from the Stephen Covey book, the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, is the second one is to begin with the end in mind. So what that means is that you kind of imagine what you want your organization to look like in whatever aspect it is. And then when you're creating your goal, that is what you sort of are always working towards. So this is, the thing he uses a lot in his books are something like making sure when you're climbing the ladder that it's actually leaning up against the right wall and that where you're aiming for is actually what you want. And so I really like the idea of beginning with the end in mind. So a little bit more about rocks. There are short-term objectives to reach your goal. They avoid wasted time and they help you focus on the high importance issues, and they help you avoid the high urgency but low important tasks. So this is an example of, it's also from Stephen Covey's book about how to break up tasks and into things that are important and urgent. So much of our life is spent on things that are unimportant and urgent, such as interrupted phone calls or meetings that don't necessarily meet your overarching goals, and other activities that feel like they're very important at the time or may have a sense of urgency that don't ultimately help you reach your goals. And then secondly, things that are not urgent and not important. These are generally leisure activities, things that are, pastimes, and because they're pastimes, they're passing time rather than using your time actively. And so the idea here is that you focus on the important tasks, things that are both urgent and not urgent. So a great example of something that we recently went through that was both important and urgent, which would be defined as a crisis, was the scramble. And so this is something that we had to focus on, drop everything and work on it, right? And so these are things that come up that are unanticipated oftentimes, but are incredibly important and cannot be ignored. So those are things that you obviously do first, things that are important and urgent. The things that are second most important are things that you generally schedule for. These are things that don't have an urgency to them, but are incredibly important. So for example, building relationships, working on relationships with business partners, or for us, it would be working on relationship with other academic departments, with the leaders within our organizations. These are, important relationships that we want to continue to foster and strengthen, planning for the future. So for example, an important but not urgent task for us would be to be prepared for next interview season so that we don't have some of the same issues that we had during this interview season. And so those are things that you're generally going to schedule. The not important things you may consider, if you're a leader, to delegate so that they don't take up your time away from unimportant things. So for example, if I walk into the office and our copier is broken, as much as I love to fix things, I'm not going to stop my workflow and my day of working on important things to just get down on the ground and start messing with the copier, even though it may be something that is urgent because we need it. And I may enjoy doing it. It is ultimately not something that is part of my long-term goals. And then things we should try to avoid are the things that are time wasters. So we should avoid them, things that are trivial. That's just a quick way. So where does rocks come from? It kind of all comes back. It's not an acronym. It basically comes back to this concept of you have a jar to fill, which is your limited space of time in your life. And so you develop what you think are the most important aspects of your life. So for example, in this, if you wanted to take your entire life, obviously spending time with your, friends and family, focusing on your health, making sure that you're getting enough sleep are your big rocks. These are things that are sort of pillars of your life, as opposed to the sand, which would be things that are bonus activities that are purely for enjoyment. So it's so easy to fill our jar with sand first. So for example, if we just go home, we put on Netflix, we check out on our phone while our, relationships are eroding around us. If we focus on the sand and put the sand in the jar first, then there won't be enough room for the large rocks. So you could imagine many people have filled their jar with sand, and then there's no room for the rocks. So you put the rocks in first. Next, you add pebbles, which are a little extra fun or satisfaction, but don't necessarily meet your overarching goals, but are perhaps more important than just sand, which is kind of those time wasters. So that's where the concept of these rocks come from. A little even further down into rocks is that they are SMART targets. And by SMART targets, your quarterly goals should be, or quarterly objectives should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. Specific means that there is one owner of it. It is one person's rock. Not to say that they're going to complete on their own each task for that rock, but it is one person that is in charge of making sure that this is successful, and they are accountable for it. It's measurable. It has very clear endpoints of when it is successful. I am going to close the door every time I leave a patient's room. That is very specific and measurable. It is achievable. So making sure you have the resources for it. So for example, I want to say that I want to publish a PubMed ID prospective study every 3 months. Well, we do not have the research staff currently available for each of us to have a PubMed prospective study published. So it's simply not achievable with our current resources. That it's relevant, so obviously it moves us towards our goals, and that it's time-based, means it has a realistic end date that is ambitious but not overly ambitious, I guess. And then every period of looking at your movement towards your rock is just, you define it as on track or off track. So on a personal level, you might look at it every week, or on a organizational level, we will look at it every month when we have our faculty meetings. So for example, for me, one of my goals is that we completely fill in the match with good candidates every year. That is my overarching goal, and that is sort of an ongoing goal for the, in perpetuity. Now, some of the more specific goals is that we may want to interview more applicants towards this overarching goal. I want to interview more applicants. I want to advertise the program. I want to make the program more attractive. And I want to continue to promote emergency medicine as a specialty that has a bright future. Those would be perhaps smaller goals that are part of the larger ones. So making it even further, if I talk about making the program more attractive, some of the rocks, some of the digestible objectives within that goal that are SMART, or I'm going to survey the unmatched residents. That is specific because I'm in charge of it, and it's a very clear, defined thing. It's measurable. Did I survey the candidates or did I not? It's attainable. We have the resources needed to make this happen. It's obviously relevant because we want to do a little data gathering as to why our program was passed over for other programs. And it's also time-based, is that it's realistic that I can accomplish this in 3 months. Okay. So this is a nice rock. Now, compare our program to others, I would say is not specific enough. Instead, I may want to say, compare the expertise of our core faculty to other regional programs, to other regions, other programs in the region. That's more specific, it's more measurable, and it's more attainable rather than the previous one. And so also we may want to compare the benefits that our graduate medical education department offers to our residents to other regional programs. So rather than just saying compare itself to other programs, these would be perhaps ones that are more specific and achievable within that time frame. So that is an introduction to rocks with a couple of examples.